They don't like for his face or his name or for him to be on anything. And so it's another thing for them to complain about. I also think Democrats generally don't want us to be celebrating the 250th anniversary of the country. And so they're like offended that we're celebrating America right now. It's another thing for them to be offended.
Scott Jennings appeared on Caitlin Collins' show on CNN to discuss the latest controversies surrounding Donald Trump, specifically the idea of putting Trump's face on a $250 bill, something that would be illegal under current rules. As usual, Scott Jennings spent his time defending the former president while making misleading claims about Democrats. We're going to look at some clips from this discussion on Caitlin Collins' CNN panel, and I also want to share my perspective on everything that was said. Let's dive into it.
My political sources tonight are Xochitl Hinojosa, the former DOJ Director of Public Affairs, who I should note her sister is running as a Democrat for governor of Texas, and also Scott Jennings, who does not have any siblings running as Democrats for governor of Texas, but is the former special assistant to President George W. Bush. Scott, I'll ask you what I asked the other Scott who was in the briefing room today. Do you think politically it's a good idea to put the president's face on a $250 bill right now?
I mean, I think they ought to follow the law, which Scott Bessent clearly laid out. You can't put a living person on money right now. Now the Congress could vote to change that. And it is right for the Treasury Department to be ready to follow the laws that Congress passes. And I kind of agree with Scott Bessent. We're having a 250th anniversary. The government's going to do all kinds of things. They've already minted some coins, I think, to commemorate the 250th anniversary. So, putting Donald Trump's face on it wouldn't offend me. I'm sure it would offend people who don't like Donald Trump. I don't think it's the most pressing issue facing the country right now, but would it surprise me if we did some commemorative items around America 250? No, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Would you criticize President Biden if he had been in office and was putting his face on money?
Look, we put the image of the president of the United States on all kinds of things in this country. It doesn't really bother me. They'll name things after Donald Trump. They'll wind up naming things after Joe Biden. They've named things after Barack Obama. It doesn't offend me one way or the other. And I really think this is a bit of a tempest in a teapot, but I can see why people who don't like Donald Trump like it because, they don't like for his face or his name or for him to be on anything. And so it's another thing for them to complain about. I also think Democrats generally don't want us to be celebrating the 250th anniversary of the country. And so they're like offended that we're celebrating America right now. It's another thing for them to be offended about.
Xochitl, you're the Democrat here.
Democrats want to celebrate the 250th anniversary, Scott, and you know that. I think one interesting thing about all of this is that this isn't the first time. We've seen Donald Trump obsessing over putting his name on the Kennedy Center. He wants to ensure that while his approval rating is at 30%, the reality is that he himself is obsessed with his own image. And so I think, Caitlin, your questions were spot on in the sense that the American people are struggling every single day. $250 is what it costs in some areas in order to pump gas. A lot of Americans can't necessarily afford it. And the fact that they're now going to have potentially, unless Congress changes the law, a commemorative sort of $250 bill of Donald Trump is just going to remind them every day about how expensive life has been under Donald Trump.
I want both of you to listen to what the Democratic leader in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, had to say about this today.
It's monopoly money. It's fantasy. And we are going to do everything possible to make sure that this never happens. I mean, this is the most ridiculous thing in the world. How sycophantic are Republicans when this is what they're focused on, as opposed to actually doing the type of things to address the damage that they've done to the American people. They said they were going to lower costs on day one. Costs haven't gone down. They've gone up. And yet they're focused on a 250 make-believe bill for Donald Trump.
I guess, Scott, to the point that he's making there, when poll numbers show that 77% of Americans, including a majority of Republicans, don't think the president's economic policies have done a good job, that they've actually increased their cost of living. How do you think they'll see a moment like this from Republicans on Capitol Hill?
Look, I think we often connect things that aren't connected. They're talking about the concept of making a commemorative item for America's 250th birthday. Whose face is on the money does not change the value of the money. It doesn't change anything about the economy. It doesn't change anything about the cost of groceries or gas or anything else. It's a picture on a piece of paper, and Democrats are, engaged in their biggest skill, their biggest talent right now, which is to be outraged about everything. I have no idea if the Congress is going to pass this. And if
Scott Jennings is being incredibly disingenuous when he talks about Democrats being outraged about everything, because that is far more in line with what Republicans have been doing for years. That's a core part of the MAGA strategy. These are the same people who were upset about Dr. Seuss books and Mr. Potato Head, and who remain fixated on transgender athletes in sports, even though trans athletes make up an extremely small fraction of the people participating in sports overall. He pulls this same routine all the time, pushing the claim that Democrats do not even want to celebrate the country's 250th anniversary because, according to his narrative, Democrats supposedly hate America, are communists, or are somehow anti-American. But as Sohi Hinojosa, and I may be pronouncing that name incorrectly, pointed out during the discussion, nobody is opposed to celebrating the 250th anniversary of the United States. The disagreement is about doing it appropriately, and many people do not believe that a sitting president, or anyone who is still alive, should have their image placed on currency. Scott Jennings is also clearly not being honest when he says he does not care whose face appears on the money. Does anyone really believe that if Malcolm X, Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or another prominent progressive figure were chosen for a new $250 bill, Scott Jennings and much of MAGA would simply shrug and move on? Of course not. He would likely be on CNN every day criticizing the decision and making it a major controversy. So yes, he absolutely cares. The difference is that he is pretending not to care when it benefits his argument, which is something he does quite often.
I won't care. And if they do, I won't care either. But it won't surprise me that the government took steps to do something to commemorate the 250th anniversary of our country. But to say we're going to put a face on a piece of paper and that somehow has an impact on the value of that paper as it relates to the overall economy, I mean, I know Democrats are economically illiterate. I didn't know they were that economically illiterate.
I mean, the reality is that it is sending a signal to the American people that they care more about Donald Trump and his ego than they actually care about providing anything and making their lives easier for them. And I think that is the main point that Democrats are trying to make. I agree with you, Scott. I think we need to commemorate the 250th anniversary. At the same time, it should not be all about Donald Trump. This is not just about Donald Trump. There is more than the 250th anniversary. And so I think that at a time when Americans are struggling, you'll continue to see Democrats trying to talk about those struggles while you have Donald Trump and Republicans rising costs and thinking about things like putting Donald Trump's face wherever they can.
Scott? I mean, Hillary Clinton, as she was pointing it out today, was saying, you know, when responding to the article, was saying that's how much it's going to cost to fill up your gas and get groceries by the end of the president's term. Obviously, that's Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump's former political opponent, saying that. But her point was to the cost of living that is the very real reality for so many Americans right now.
Look, I don't have anything to say about the $250 bill beyond what I've already said politically. I will just say, though, deep down, somewhere inside of me, my uber conservative is screaming, let's not print any more money at all, because every time we print more money, it makes the value of it go down. Lord knows the Democrats spent and printed a bunch of it during the Biden years, and that's what caused the inflation crisis in the first place. So maybe we could all agree, let's just print a little less money and make it worth a little bit more. How about that?
You should call the White House. They'll listen to you, Scott. Tell them not to go forward with this $250 bill.
Scott Jennings, Xochitl Hinojosa, thank you both for being here tonight.
For Scott Jennings to sit there and claim that Democrats do not understand economics because they supposedly ruin the economy is just more of the same partisan talking points. Maybe he genuinely believes it, or maybe he has spent so much time inside the MAGA and far-right bubble that he has lost touch with the broader economic record. The reality is that the economy has often performed better under Democratic presidents, while Donald Trump is following a pattern that many critics associate with previous Republican administrations that left behind major economic problems. Time and again, Democrats have had to come in and deal with the fallout, and historically, a large majority of job growth over the past several decades has occurred under Democratic presidents. Scott Jennings also tries to brush off the controversy by saying that it does not matter whose face appears on the money. But if that is really his position, then why not honor a variety of important historical figures who are not already featured on U.S. currency? That would likely be far less controversial for most Americans. Of course, if those figures were not white men, many of the same MAGA voices would probably be on television complaining about diversity initiatives and political correctness. At the end of the day, this debate comes back to what many people see as the biggest narcissist in modern American politics, someone who wants to put his name, image, and personal brand on virtually everything. The 250th anniversary of the United States should be an opportunity for Americans to come together and celebrate the country's history, but instead it has become another source of division. Critics argue that this is the result of having one of the most polarizing presidents in modern American history in office, and Scott Jennings continues to go on CNN day after day to defend him. Meanwhile, a large portion of the country is exhausted by the constant drama and is looking forward to a time when the focus shifts back to governing rather than personality-driven politics, even if that means waiting until 2028. But let me know what you think in the comments. Do you agree with far-right MAGA supporter Scott Jennings that this is all much ado about nothing and that Democrats simply hate America? Or do you think this is yet another example, highlighted on CNN, of a president who many believe is not fit to lead and is driven by an extreme sense of self-importance? Share your thoughts in the comments below because I'd love to hear where you stand on this debate. As always, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'm Idiots on Culture, and I'll see you in the next one.